Hello everybody, welcome back to Oma Jon Plays Minecraft. In today's episode, we are continuing building a wall. And originally, I intended for this episode to be a three-parter, or a two-parter, but it looks like it's probably going to be a three, possibly even a four-parter, depending on how long we decide we want to take this endeavor. As you can see right now, I pick up right where we left off at making this little stairway up to the next level, but as I lamented in the previous episode, I find out, shortly after this section, that there's two other layers to this village, higher than I originally thought. So this might turn into a pretty big project, but we're going to keep going. We're going to do what we do, just keep chugging on along. And today's subject that I brought that's not Minecraft related is going to be computers. Interestingly enough, I make these episodes on a computer. I know, shocker. And the computer is one that I built myself because, you know, what else do you do with your time? I've always wanted to build one, and I needed a new computer, so I was like, you know, now's the time. I have an actual job now, so might as well build it. So I built it last summer, and I mean, it's a great computer for what I need it for. It does everything I need. There are a few things where I was like, don't know how much I'll need of this, blah, 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 blah. I actually started learning all of the Adobe Suite products, which is what I use to do the video editing for these. I use Premiere Pro. And it's obviously a power hog of a program. It uses, like, all of the power that you have. There's that. I also learned After Effects, which is where I made the intro sequence to these videos, which is even more of a power hog. So I'm heavily considering upgrading a couple of the components, primarily the RAM, because I have 16 gigabytes, which is, you know, usually considered fine. But for After Effects, 16 gigabytes does nothing. It's still constantly just like, bro, you're out of RAM. You need like 20 times more than this. So I'm thinking about upgrading the RAM, and while I'm doing that, I thought might as well get a little bit faster of RAM as well. I got a 3200 megahertz. I'm thinking this time I'll probably do 4000 megahertz, because, you know, the processor and the motherboard support it. The next thing would then be the processor, which I go back and forth on this, because the processor I have is a Ryzen 5600X, which is considered a pretty standard one for gamers. A lot of gamers buy that one. People who build their own PCs, a lot of them go with that one because it's pretty reasonably priced. It's phenomenal. I don't really consider myself a gamer, although I do now make gaming YouTube videos, so I may have to revise that. But solid processor all around. So I got that one, but it's great for most things, but it does sometimes struggle. And I just, you know, having a couple extra cores, especially when it comes to video rendering, would help us a lot. I think I was doing some research, and it looks like the processor I currently have versus I think it's a 5950, which is like the best one that you can get right now, or a 5750, one of the two. That processor would be able to render about, I think, either 3 or 4 times faster than my current one, and I'm like, that's a pretty big jump. That means I could get these videos out there a lot faster than I am now. Because the biggest hiccup right now is actually the rendering, because it takes about an hour or so to render one of these videos after I get everything recorded and edited and blah, 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 blah. Especially when mid-rendering, I'm like, oh, there's a mistake that I have to fix. So then I go in and fix it, and it's like, oh, well, now we have to re-render, start from scratch. Hoping to avoid that. So the next component on the list would be a graphics card, which I went with a very standard, not even standard, substandard graphics card. I went with an AMD RX 560, which is not a particularly great graphics card for the modern era, but it is perfect for my needs. I mean, my system's playing when I play Minecraft on my PC as opposed to my PlayStation. I get about 70 frames a second, which is perfectly fine for me. I don't need more than that. I know some people can tell the difference. I cannot tell a lick of difference between even just like 50 and 70. Most of the time 30 is about as... Anything less than 30 and I can tell that it's not very good, but once it's above 30 it doesn't really matter to me. It looks the same. The next concern, if I do make all of these changes, is that I would need to upgrade my computer's cooling system, because right now there's no liquid cooling because the stuff never gets all that hot with the type of stuff I do. I mean, it gets toasty, but it's a computer. It never gets to the point where it's like, okay, well, some extra cooling is really going to make a huge difference. But if I bump up to the next processor, get a better GPU, the whole shebang, then that's going to be I'm going to need better cooling. Probably get an AIO all-in-one liquid cooling system for the CPU. Don't know for sure how I deal with the whole GPU graphics card situation, but I have a feeling that's just going to stay on just using air instead of any kind of liquid cooling for that. The graphics card I've been looking at is sticking with AMD, strong AMD supporter. I know NVIDIA usually is, at least everyone I know who's in the gaming world, people usually prefer NVIDIA, but I like AMD. I've never purchased something by AMD and it not work flawlessly. So, sticking with them, brand loyalty, woot woot. So I'm thinking an RX, I'm thinking a 6750 or 6750 XT. I like how NVIDIA and AMD, they're like, let's just throw on some extra letters at the end to make it clear that it's a little bit better than the other one that has the same name. But some of them have huge improvements. Like, I was looking up what's the difference between a 6750 and a 6750 XT. And the XT, they were like, this is thousands of times better. Okay, interesting. Well, it's also thousands of dollars more expensive. Not really. But in this economy, they're pretty dang expensive. I think the 6750 XT, I think we were looking at close to $700 or so. Maybe actually more than that, I can't remember. But the one I bought, the 56X, not even 56X, is just 560. There we go. I bought it because it was really cheap compared to the other graphics cards, which meant that it was $300. But I was building this bad boy right at the heat of the chip. I was building this bad boy right at the top of when everything was way overpriced, which is still way overpriced, but the graphics card that I bought has gone down like $70 or so since I purchased it. But that was a year ago. When I was looking to build, it was like, well, graphics card prices were still going up, and they continued going up for a month or two, and then it started settling back down. But we're still a long way from selling these things at a price that they're actually worth. Worth being, of course, in air quotes, because how do we determine worth on something? Supply and demand is... Seems like there's a lot more. I was taught that supply and demand were your primary factors, but now that we're really out here in this world, it really seems like supply and demand is like not one of the primary factors. It might be the primary, but it seems like there are about 1,000 other factors at play that all amount to reasons that I have to pay more for things that aren't supply and demand. I mean, even just things like diamonds. Supply is infinite. We have more diamonds than we'll use in ever. And it's like, no, $1,000 for a diamond. Why? We're never gonna run out of these bad boys. And we sell them in such small pieces that, like, why is there... Anyways, not talking about diamonds today. We're talking about computers. The last component to upgrade would be the storage. Storage I have is fine. I have a good M2 SSD. It's 500 gigabytes, which is fine for what I use it for. The video editing, I can see where I would quickly run out of data if doing a lot of this video editing stuff, but I also have a 2 gigabyte internal hard drive disk that I use to store everything, like when I'm done with it, basically. Like after these videos are completed, everything, I just hop it off onto that drive and call it good. But it would be convenient to have a faster SSD, not necessarily bigger, but if I'm gonna get one that's faster, might as well get one that's bigger as well, just for the fun of it. I also heard that if you get an SSD that is fast, if you get an SSD that has more storage, it's also like a hair faster, just because the little the storage units, it sounds weird to say it that way, but like the chips that actually hold the memory are closer together, so you don't, it's easier for the computer to get them quickly because they're all closer together. It doesn't take as long. And I was like, we've got to be talking less than a nanosecond here. But I guess if you're doing billions of calculations a minute, then nanoseconds of nanoseconds might add up pretty quickly. So I'm thinking I'll get a bigger one of those. I'm thinking 2 terabyte. Might just do one though, because I do still have the internal hard drive. I thought about getting another internal drive, but calling it getting an SSD internal. A SATA one that's just another storage, but storage for things that might be a little bit more pressing to access later, or to put things on that I will need on a semi-regular basis, but don't need to be on the primary drive. If I do get a new SSD, I would of course get an M.2 one, which I would replace the boot drive I'm currently using with that, and then put the SSD I currently have into the secondary slot. My motherboard has 2 M.2 slots, so I would just stick the one that's currently in the first one in the second one, and put the new one in the first one. Now, the biggest concern with all of this is price, because those 4 upgrades that I'm talking about, we're looking at close to $2,000, which is, that's an investment that I don't have the money for right now. Hoping to see if I can work more or something like that, either put in, it's not really overtime, but make a position, continue working the way I am now, but remotely as I move on to graduate school, and use that as a way to hopefully then save some money from that to make these upgrades. But it depends, because we all know school's expensive, jobs never pay as much as you want them to. The whole ordeal that we're all facing in this really strange economic situation. A lot of people feel as if we're closing in on a pretty big recession. Gas is $1,000 for not even a gallon. It's just $1,000. You walk up, no matter how much you get, $1,000. But that's its own separate problem. Not dealing with that today, and I'm not the person to deal with it, because as we know, I'm a musician and I make YouTube videos about Minecraft, which I am still really heavily considering expanding some games. I'm a big fan of the Final Fantasy series, so I really thought about doing like a Final Fantasy 15 playthrough, adding that to this channel, because why not? Who doesn't want just the boy band game? Then I also thought about doing Journey. I love Journey, so I thought about doing like, what if we just do a Journey playthrough every so often and add it to the channel? Why not? Oma Jon plays all kinds of different games. Oma Jon's just out here living their best life. We are currently working on closing in towards the end of this episode, and I am pretty happy with our progress so far. We've got the main level down at the bottom, connected to this level right here with the beetroot, the little house, the cow field patch thing. And we got that connected to the other part which is just the one house on a separate plane of itself. But at the end of all of this, we have an entire another section way up there on top of the mountain that we'll have to get to in another video, because we're closing in on that 15-minute mark, which is, I really try to stay under 16 minutes when possible, other than the second video when I hadn't made that rule yet. But yeah, I hope you guys had an absolutely wonderful time. I know I sure did, and I look forward to hanging out with you guys again soon. Bye bye.